Hello everyone, and welcome to TowerGate, day 57, April the 29th. It is Saturday. As promised, today I am going to lay out for you the entire chain regarding the dossier. The dossier, of course, being the thing that provided the FBI with the reason, they state, to begin launching the FISA warrants and the TowerGate, or the surveillance of Trump. I'm going to do this in 2 days. It's going to be a two-part series here because there's too much to cover in one video. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to lay out the entire history of the dossier from the time it was created to the time it was released on BuzzFeed. Tomorrow, in part 2, I will tell you what was in the dossier, what the sources were for the dossier, and what we can expect to move forward from this point. So there's a lot of information to cover, and I'll say this is that everything I'm going to tell you today about everything about the history of the dossier, how it was created, by who, and all the way up to the time it was released into the public domain from BuzzFeed, this is all public information. This is all going to come out in these hearings. Now, the difference is that what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it out for you so it's crystal clear exactly what happened, who is behind it, and why, and all that sort of thing. What you're going to get in the congressional hearings, I can tell you, is that they want to make this go away. They would rather not even have these hearings, but now Trump has kind of forced it on them, and they've had all this buildup, so now they have to put on a dog and pony show. They're going to try to put this thing to bed and bury it and cover it up. But like I say, they cannot cover up this information because it's in the public domain. This is all verified. 95% of what I'm going to tell you is verified. And if I tell you something that's an accusation, I'll let you know when it's an accusation. But unless I tell you it's an accusation, it is an actual proven fact. It's in the public domain. They cannot hide it. But what they are going to do in these hearings is that you're going to get a lot of facts that they cannot run away from. Because, again, this stuff is all in the public domain. So what they're going to do is they're going to drag these hearings out. They're going to throw tons and tons of worthless information and bickering back and forth. They're going to create a sort of smoke cloud effect. They're going to fog the entire picture up so that when they finish these hearings, you are more confused about what happened than before when the hearings began. That's the whole operation they will be running. It's a cover-up. Like all congressional hearings, they never get to the bottom of anything because it's never the point to get to the bottom of anything. It is to confuse you so that when it's all said and done, you think there was some hearings, you think there was something done, but you have no idea what really happened because they obfuscate so many of the facts. They cloud the mirror, so to speak, in such a way that you really have no clear idea of what exactly did happen. So I'm not going to let that happen. I am going to break it down crystal clear for you, step by step, exactly how this played out from the time the dossier was created to when it was released on BuzzFeed. I'm going to do that for you right now. Okay, here we go with the dossier. This actually began back in 2011, and there's a man whose name is going to be coming up in these hearings. You've probably never heard of him, but his name is Glenn Simpson. He is instrumental in understanding this story. Glenn Simpson was a veteran reporter for the Wall Street Journal. He and two other colleagues in 2011 left the Wall Street Journal and created a new company located in Washington, D.C. The name of the company was Fusion GPS. Fusion GPS was a company they set up to do political opposition research. In other words, whenever a politician is running in a campaign and he wants to get some dirt on his opponent, you would contact Fusion GPS, and these guys would dig up the dirt for you to use in a campaign. Basically, they do political intelligence. And of course, being veteran reporters at the Wall Street Journal, they are extremely well connected. They have connections in the United States and around the world with intelligence officials, politicians, and power players, big money donors, people like that. So Glenn Simpson is a critical part of understanding the dossier chain. So in 2011, Glenn Simpson and his two partners set up Fusion GPS in Washington, D.C. Now, fast forward to 2015. In 2015, when Donald Trump was in the early stages of the campaign, was running, some never Trump Republican We assume this was a person with a lot of money, or it was someone who was representing someone with a lot of money, approached Fusion GPS to get them to do some opposition research on Trump. Now, it is alleged, this is not a fact, this is an allegation. It is an allegation that this big money backed Never Trumper was representing the Jeb Bush campaign. That is alleged. It's not proven that he was working for Jeb Bush. But it is a fact that a big money guy representing one of the Republican candidates in the field did approach GPS, Fusion GPS, in 2015, early in the summer, to gather opposition research on Donald Trump. Fast forward to June 2016. Trump secures the GOP nomination, wins the GOP nomination, at which point the big money donor who had gone to GPS Fusion to get opposition research on Donald Trump realizes, of course, that he's won the nomination, so there's really no more need to be paying GPS Fusion to produce opposition research. And they were paying opposition research somewhere in the neighborhood of $12,000 to $15,000 per month. So now, Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS finds himself in an interesting situation. He had been pulling down $12,000 to $15,000 a month, putting together this opposition research on Donald Trump for the anti-Trump Republican, believed to be Jeb Bush, but not proven. And now all that cash flow is about to come to an end because Donald Trump has won the nomination. So what does Glenn Simpson do? Well, he says, I got this opposition research. I'd like to keep that money rolling in. Hey, why don't I go to some big money Democratic donors and see if they would like to pay me $12,000 to $15,000 a month to collect opposition research on Trump, because now that's the guy they're going to be running against. So he did exactly that, and he was successful in finding some big money Democratic donors who would continue to pay him to collect opposition research through his firm, Fusion GPS, in Washington, D.C., to continue to dig up dirt on Donald Trump, which would then be used this time by Democrats. Now, at this point, we do not know these Democratic donors. We do not know their names, but I expect that we will learn their names in the hearings. If not in these hearings, then we should certainly learn their names in one of the two civil court cases that will be taking place in the future. We do not know if they were directly connected to the Hillary Clinton campaign or Hillary herself. We do not know that. But you can kind of assume that. I would find it hard to believe that this information wouldn't be shared with the Hillary Clinton campaign. But that's purely an accusation. But what we do know for a fact is that Glenn Simpson did go to some big Democratic donors and he found some buyers. So once he found his buyers and he decided to get some more information on Donald Trump, he turned to a very good friend of his, a man named Christopher Steele, who we've talked a lot about. Christopher Steele, of course, was a former MI6 agent who was stationed for 3 years in Russia. He was the head of the British MI6 Russian intelligence in Moscow, where he made a lot of friends and made a lot of contacts in American intelligence and American politics and intelligence people all over Europe. He also had a long-time relationship with Glenn Simpson when he was a reporter for the Wall Street Journal, and that's how they developed a relationship. Christopher Steele, after being in MI6, went over to the British version of the NSA known as the GCHQ, where he was the head of GCHQ. Now, he had just left the GCHQ and started his own company in London called Orbis, which was essentially very similar to Fusion GPS in Washington, except for he was a British citizen and he was in London. But a very similar type of company. They did political research and opposition research for politicians and campaigns and things like that. They were basically intelligence people. So you had the media people created Fusion GPS, intelligence people along with Christopher Steele were operating their Orbis company there in London. Now, you may be asking, why would Christopher Steele have so much interest in in American politics and the American election. Well, as it turns out, Christopher Steele is a globalist. He is very closely connected to some very heavyweight Democrats, including the Clintons. He is a Trump hater. He was a Putin hater. And he has a lot of friends and a lot of contacts in the United States. He's traveled to the United States many, many times. Has a lot of friends and a lot of people he associates with here in the States. And as you can see, as the story goes along, Christopher Steele was very, very interested in doing anything he could to stop Donald Trump. So when Glenn Simpson contacted Christopher Steele after securing these Democratic donors to keep his operation going, he was very, very happy to assist Glenn Simpson in digging up dirt on Donald Trump. And he was the perfect man to do so because he still had many, many contacts in Russia. So this takes us to the next point. Steele begins speaking with a lot of his former Russian contacts, and he begins to these Russian contacts, whom he is paying, begin giving him all kinds of information, which would later finding itself into the dossier. Tomorrow we're going to talk about who those sources were, but for today let's just accept the fact that he was getting a lot of information from these Russians. Now, as he was getting this information, he was also simultaneously, while working for GPS, collecting this information for Glenn Simpson to provide his Democratic clients information. He was also a rabid Trump hater, and as he was giving this information to Fusion GPS, he wasn't really seeing very much coming out in the news headlines. He wasn't feeling like this information that he was passing along to GPS was gaining much traction. So he decided to take it one step farther. He began making contact with some FBI intelligence people in Rome, Italy, and he began giving them this information himself. And so now this information was being given to Fusion GPS from Christopher Steele directly to Glenn Simpson at Fusion GPS, but he was also now disseminating this information he was getting from his Russian contacts directly to FBI agents in Rome, Italy, so that it would find its way back into the United States and it probably onto James Comey's inbox. And he was getting very frustrated that even after doing this, he was still not seeing any of his information showing up in any media reports. And he was beginning to think that no one was paying attention to it. And of course, at the time, the thing that was dominating the news cycle, now that it was Hillary versus Trump, was of course Hillary's email problems and her problems with her server. So this was frustrating Steele greatly. So what he did was he came to the U.S. and he met with David Corn. This occurred in October, in the first week of October. Not sure exactly which day, but sometime in that first week of October, a month before the vote, he sat down with David Corn, a veteran reporter from Mother Jones. And he began giving David Corn information, hoping that David Corn would put this information out. Takes us now to October the 31st. Corn finally decides that after doing a little investigation that he would write a summarization. He would write a story summarizing some of the facts that he had been getting, these facts which turned out to be untrue, but nevertheless, David Corn went ahead and wrote a story in Mother Jones. And basically the story was stating that a veteran FBI spy had been given information alleging that there was an operation of some sort of collusion going on between Trump and the Russians. Now this story appeared in Mother Jones on October 31st. But again, it did not get much traction because we all know what happened on October 31st. On October 31st, James Comey came to the podium to announce that they had just discovered about 600,000 more emails on a device, on a laptop, I believe it was, belonging to Anthony Weiner. And on that laptop, there were thousands and thousands of emails that they believed that were possibly classified emails that had been sent to Huma Abedin from Hillary Clinton, because it appeared that Huma Abedin had turned this computer over to her husband so that he could use it. And now he was using it to send dick pics across the country, including to underage girls. And so the FBI confiscated this laptop, and that's where they discovered some of these emails that were from communications between Huma and Hillary. And so this, of course, dominated the news cycle just a week before the vote. This was in late October. Now, takes us to early November. Corn, realizing that Hillary was in deep trouble with these recent revelations and that she was now back under criminal investigation by the FBI, and it was only a week before the vote and it looked like Trump may win, Corn made a last-ditch effort to do some harm to Donald Trump. So he sat down and had lunch with a Guardian reporter where he shared the information he had gotten from Christopher Steele and also with a New York Times reporter. And so a couple days before the vote, both the Guardian and the New York Times wrote stories, again, with summaries of some of the information given to them by David Corn, which had been given to him personally by Christopher Steele. Then November 8th comes around. We vote. Trump wins. So Trump wins the election November 8th. Then, in late November, less than 1 month after Trump wins the presidency, John McCain attends the Halifax International Security Forum, where McCain and his right-hand man, a man named David Kramer, that is a name that you will be hearing and getting more comfortable with as this moves forward. He is a man who was a former State Department official, alleged to have been a bit of a spy, and he also heads up an organization called the McCain something or other. It's like a foreign policy think tank. He's a very close friend of John McCain, and he's his right-hand man. He travels with him a lot, and he's like a kind of a foreign policy guru with a lot of contacts that McCain likes to bounce information off of. He's kind of his trusted right-hand man. So McCain and David Kramer attend this Halifax International Security Forum in Canada. And while there, they meet with a man named Sir Andrew Lloyd. Sir Andrew Lloyd was the former British ambassador to Russia. And while he was serving as the former ambassador to Russia, he struck up quite a good relationship with Christopher Steele, who was at that time the UK's spy chief in Moscow. So, in that particular meeting or conversation, at this event in Halifax International Security Forum in Canada, this man, Sir Andrew Wood, strikes up a conversation with John McCain, along with his good friend, David Kramer. And Sir Andrew Wood begins to tell John McCain and David Kramer about this little dossier, which definitely gets the attention of John McCain because he hates Donald Trump. So John McCain decides, yes, he would be very interested in getting his hands on this dossier. So this man, Sir Andrew Lloyd, sets up a meeting between Christopher Steele and David Kramer. And shortly after that meeting, David Kramer gets on an aircraft in Washington, D.C. and makes a direct flight to London, where he meets for several hours in the home of Christopher Steele, where Christopher Steele passes along the 35-page dossier to Kramer. Kramer gets back on a plane that very night and heads right back to Washington, D.C., and he gives John McCain the dossier. December 9th, 2016, John McCain goes and visits James Comey, and he gives James Comey the dossier that he believes will destroy President Donald Trump, bring him down. Now, it is alleged that John McCain also shared that dossier with some other people. It is believed that he might have shared that dossier with Evan McMullin, and probably a friend of Evan McMullin. If you remember, Evan McMullin was the former CIA spook who ran in Utah as an independent to try to prevent Donald Trump from securing the electoral votes in Utah. He failed. He had a right-hand man who was a very good friend of both he and John McCain, sort of a middleman. And we believe that it's possible, this is an accusation, not a fact, that John McCain may have also shared this dossier with this middleman between him and our good friend, the CIA spook in Utah. Then, in the waning days of the Obama administration, Obama and congressional leaders are briefed on the dossier. They were briefed by the top 4 of the intelligence agencies, which we can assert are James Comey, James Clapper, General or Admiral Mike Rogers, and our good friend John Brennan at the CIA. We know that as a fact. So we know that Obama and congressional leaders were briefed on the dossier just prior to President Obama leaving office. Then, as soon as Obama left office, about a week after the inauguration, Donald Trump is sworn in. The 4 heads of the intelligence agency that had briefed Barack Obama approximately a week earlier went to Trump Tower, and they briefed him with a 2-page summary of the dossier. So Trump actually found out about this dossier about a week after he was inaugurated, when he was briefed on it by Brennan, Comey, Clapper, and Rogers at Trump Towers. Very shortly after that, within a few days, BuzzFeed publishes the entire 35-page dossier, known to be false. Then, the Wall Street Journal outs Christopher Steele as being the source of the dossier, because when BuzzFeed released it, they did not reveal the source. It was the Wall Street Journal that revealed the source of the dossier. And that shouldn't surprise us, because remember our good friend Glenn Simpson? Our good friend Glenn Simpson of Fusion GPS? He worked for the Wall Street Journal for 15 years. Clearly, that is how he must have read the BuzzFeed article. He must have contacted the folks over at the Wall Street Journal, and probably being the money whore that he is, he probably said, hey, I'll do anything for $1, including I'll drop the name of the guy who put the dossier together. I know all about it. Hey, because I'm the guy that contacted him and was paying him to create the dossier. Outstanding. My. So immediately after the dossier is leaked by BuzzFeed in its entirety, and then the Wall Street Journal comes out and reveals the source was Christopher Steele, Christopher Steele freaks out. He grabs his family, including his cats, and he gets lost. For 2 months, he disappears. No one knows where Christopher Steele is. So he goes into hiding for 2 months, during which time one of the 3 Russians who are believed to have been the source of the dossier is found dead in his car 3 days after Christmas. 3 other Russian FSB agents believed to have been sources for the dossier are arrested. And this is the entire history of the dossier. We also know one other fact that I didn't mention here, that if you remember, I told you that Christopher Steele, once he was contracted to produce this information, he was getting very, very frustrated that he wasn't seeing the information that he was giving to his buddy Glenn Simpson back at GPS. He was not seeing any of this showing up in the press. All he was seeing was this stuff going on with Hillary. This frustrated him greatly. And so, as I told you, he began trying to work another angle. He began feeding this to FBI intelligence officials in Rome, Italy, personally. And it appears at this time that this information was making its way to the FBI. And this is what was frustrating Christopher Steele, because he's thinking to himself, gosh, I'm feeding these guys this intel. They should be killing Trump in the press right now, but the FBI doesn't appear to be doing anything. But we have learned, and we don't know exactly what time in the time frame, this is one question that James Comey is going to have to be asked. We do know that James Comey, at one point, after receiving all this information, prior to him getting the entire dossier hand-delivered to him by John McCain, prior to that and prior to the election, it was in this time that he sought the FISA warrant. So James Comey went ahead and sought the FISA warrant. We'll get back to that in just a moment. But we also know that once James Comey started receiving this intel from his agents in Rome, Italy, and he began reading this intel. He used that intel, of course, to get the FISA warrant, but before confirming it or verifying it, he went ahead and made contact with Christopher Steele, probably through one of his agents in Rome, Italy, where he made a standing offer, which was, hey, I'm getting all this intelligence from my agents in Rome, but this is kind of crazy stuff. I need this to be verified. So he contacted Christopher Steele through a third party and said, hey, we will pay you $50,000 if you can verify this. Now, clearly, James Comey could not have been knowledgeable that Christopher Steele himself was the source of this information. Because why in the world would James Comey go to someone and say, yeah, I'm going to pay you $50,000 to verify this crazy stuff I'm getting from my intelligence people in Rome, Italy, when in fact he was the very source of it? Why would you pay someone, offer him $50,000 to verify information that they themselves were the source of? It makes no sense. It should also be noted that we learned something very important from Edward Snowden, that when you seek a FISA warrant and the FISA warrant is approved, they use the NSA to conduct the surveillance, which is done by phone, tracking your email, tracking your tweets, tracking any type of electronic communications. We learned from Edward Snowden that when they get a FISA warrant, that they go out 3 levels. And what that means is, let's just say that someone goes and gets a FISA warrant on you and allows them to listen to your phone calls. What this allows the NSA to do is that not only does the NSA listen to the phone calls that you send and receive, or tweets or emails or any other type of electronic communication, but they also get to go to the second level, which is they then get to also surveil all the people that you have communication with. They get to surveil all the people they have communication with. Then they get to go to a third level, which is all the people who they have communication with that they have communication with. So now the FISA warrant, giving them the ability to listen to one person, literally gives them the ability to monitor and surveil hundreds or thousands of people, depending on how many people the people you talk to, and the people they talk to. You see what I'm saying, folks? One FISA warrant can produce surveillance on thousands and thousands of people. Now, when you're talking about people like Donald Trump and some of the other people around him, think how many people they have contact with. And in this particular case, it appears, this is not 100% known, but it's pretty much known, that when James Comey took this evidence to get the FISA warrant, they primarily were interested in Carter Page. But by getting Carter Page, they were not only being able to surveil Carter Page and monitor all his electronic communications, but all the people who they talked to, and all the people they talked to, the people they talked to. So he was able to get 3 levels deep, and you can assume that a man like Carter Page, who is an international businessman, probably has hundreds of people that he communicates with, and they probably have hundreds of people they communicate with, and they probably have hundreds of people they communicate with. So as you can see, we're talking about being able to surveil and monitor with surveillance thousands and thousands and thousands of people based on a FISA warrant, on a single FISA warrant. But we know that the FISA warrant just didn't stop with Carter Page. It also included Paul Manafort and the 3 levels of Paul Manafort, and Roger Stone and the 3 levels of Roger Stone. So we're talking about tens of thousands of people all being surveilled. And we know that because Paul Manafort was running Donald Trump's campaign for several months during the primary, that he was certainly in contact with Donald Trump and everyone Donald Trump was communicating with. So they wanted to surveil Donald Trump, but they couldn't get a warrant to do so. So they used this phony dossier of a bunch of garbage to get a FISA warrant to surveil Manafort, Stone, and Carter Page, knowing good and well that they would all have communication with Donald Trump, and that they would get to monitor not only those 3 guys on 3 levels, but they would be able to monitor President Trump on 3 levels, meaning everyone he talked to, everyone they talked to, and everyone they talked to. You understand where I'm coming from? Good. My friends, there you have it. This is what that they're going to discover in the House and Senate Intelligence Committee. They're going to learn every bit of this because it's already public information. It's open source material. It's out there. We know exactly every single thing I told you happened. 100%. They're going to have to produce this in these congressional hearings. But what they're going to do is they're going to, in the middle of all this, they're not going to lay it out for you clearly. They're going to muddy it up and present many, many distractions and various other types of obstructions to make sure that as you get this information from them, by the end of these hearings, whether it's months or years, you are going to be so damn confused about exactly what all was learned that you are not going to have a single clue what to make of it. But that's not going to happen to you who are watching my video today, because now you know the exact history of the dossier, without the distractions, without it being clouded over, without the obstructions. You know exactly what happened. And we have a lot of questions for John McCain, do we not? We have a lot of questions for Mr. Johnson. And most importantly, the most important question that's going to be asked and what is going to be learned is going to be who from BuzzFeed made the decision to leak that, and who leaked that dossier to BuzzFeed. That is the question, my friends. That is the one to watch for. The hearings are going to do their very, very best not to disclose that little fact, because that little fact will give us the individual from the intelligence community under the Obama administration, or possibly in the Hillary Clinton campaign, that leaked that information to BuzzFeed, that put it in the public domain. And that is going to give us the circle, the inner circle of people who were responsible for launching this political attack to destroy the candidacy of Donald Trump and then later the presidency of Donald Trump. This is what is going to prove that it was a political operation and not what we've been told was just that it was some incidental collection that was being done by the GHCQ, and they picked this information up and decided, oh boy, we've picked up some very damaging things. We should pass this on to the FBI. This is a story we've been told, but we now know this is a lie because I just told you the truth. That's the truth. The narrative is blown up, my friends, and I just blew it up for you right here. Thank you very much for tuning in. Day 57, TowerGate, April 29th. We'll be back tomorrow for part 2, where I will tell you who the alleged sources, who we're pretty sure were the sources because one of them's dead and 3 of them are in jail in Russia. So we're pretty sure we know who the sources were. Maybe not their exact names. I think we have the names of 1 or 2, but we know their titles. We know positions they held in the Russian FSB. One of them was an oligarch, high-level oil oligarch in Gazprom, I believe, and the other 3 were intelligence people in the FSB. There's probably some other dead bodies floating around Moscow right now as well. We're also going to take a look at where we go forward from here, because as we know, the Congress is going to be running a cover-up operation, which isn't going to work, because I'm going to be telling you, as this moves forward, the truth. I will tell you the truth. The Congressional Committee is going to be running a cover-up operation, but I will defeat them. Now, I'm also going to talk a little bit about these civil cases that are now being filed. Donald Trump is obviously outsmarting these people every step of the way. I'll explain to you how that's all going to come in play and how we probably are going to get there and find out and hold people accountable. But it's not going to happen because of the Congress. It's going to happen because of the civil cases. So there we go. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you for subscribing. I appreciate your comments. Please share this video with all your friends. Let's get the truth out there. Thank you very much. You all have a good weekend. I'll be back tomorrow and we'll finish up with part 2 of the dossier.